Tom Morgan trusted Lisa Hayes with his heart, and Jordan Hayes trusted Tom with his life. But when loyalty turned to lust, only one would walk away alive. Tom Morgan had everything a man could want, or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. He lived in a peaceful cul-de-sac in Westbridge, a small suburban town where people smiled at each other on morning walks, and children played safely on tree-lined sidewalks. His home was a modest 2-story brick house with a white picket fence and a neatly trimmed lawn. Tom was 38, clean-shaven, and always wore a calm expression that made people feel at ease. He worked in finance, managing accounts for a mid-sized firm, and had a reputation for being reliable and detail-oriented. Jordan's loud humor had once been charming, but now it grated on her nerves. He came home tired and rarely listened when she talked. He assumed everything was fine, but Lisa was aching for connection. She and Tom had always had a comfortable friendship. They laughed at the same things, understood each other's quiet moods. No one noticed the tiny clues, the sudden mood swings, the unexpected absences, the tension that occasionally surfaced at gatherings. They were good at pretending, good at maintaining the illusion that everything was fine. The man staring back looked tired, worn out, and hollow. He had always seen himself as someone who followed the rules, someone who did the right thing. But now, he was lying to the people he loved, risking everything for moments of stolen happiness. And in a town like Westbridge, where everyone knows everyone, it was only a matter of time before the truth came crashing in. What began as a hidden affair between two unhappy people would soon spiral into something far darker, something no one saw coming. They began to talk more first during gatherings, then over text messages, and eventually through late-night phone calls when their spouses were asleep. He felt torn between the woman he had built a life with and the woman who now occupied his every thought. Lisa became more anxious, snapping at her husband over minor things. The betrayal was growing behind his back like a shadow, silent and unseen. The warmth that had once defined their friendships began to fade. There were fewer gatherings, more awkward silences and strange excuses. Still, the Morgans and Hayeses tried to act normal, smiling through forced conversations and waving at neighbors who had no idea what was brewing beneath the surface. Emily, too, believed in her husband, believing his late nights and sudden work trips were just part of his demanding job. She had no reason to doubt him. She had no idea her marriage was slowly unraveling. The thrill of sneaking around was fading, replaced by fear and guilt. Yet neither of them stopped. They were in too deep, and they didn't know how to back out without destroying everything around them. Tom's wife, Emily, was equally admired. She was soft-spoken, always polite, and taught second grade at the local elementary school. Emily and the kids were out of town visiting her parents. At first, they were cautious, meeting only when absolutely sure no one was around. The caution soon gave way to confidence. They created elaborate excuses, claiming meetings or errands that covered up the truth. Tom would say he was driving to the next city for a client lunch. Lisa would say she had a boutique event in the evening. They started using burner phones to text, deleting messages as soon as they were read. Lisa's house was dark and quiet, Jordan working a night shift at a construction site. Tom shared his fear that he was losing his connection with Emily. Lisa confessed how invisible she sometimes felt with Jordan. They found comfort in each other's arms, convincing themselves that they were finally being understood. But underneath that comfort was a growing sense of danger. Every stolen hour came with the risk of being caught. Every lie they told made the truth harder to face. Tom stopped by to check if she needed help lighting candles or resetting the breakers. What should have been a simple gesture turned into something more. The flickering candlelight, the silence, the shared loneliness, it created a moment that neither of them could undo. They had 2 children, Ava and Ethan, both under 10, who were often seen riding bikes or drawing chalk art on the driveway. Their dog, Bailey, completed the picture, a fluffy golden retriever who wagged its tail at everyone. But behind the carefully curated routines and smiles, something had started to shift. Tom had grown quieter over the past year, less interested in conversations and more preoccupied with his phone. He had taken on more projects at work and often stayed late at the office, sometimes not coming home until after midnight. Emily assumed it was stress. He wasn't unkind, just distant. She chalked it up to the pressure of providing for the family. Together, the Morgans seemed to live an enviable life of quiet success and contentment. Just 2 houses down lived Jordan and Lisa Hayes. They had moved to Westbridge 5 years ago and quickly became close friends with the Morgans. Jordan was a construction manager, big, confident, and always cracking jokes. Lisa worked part-time at a local boutique and was known for her stylish outfits and warm smile. The two couples formed a tight bond. Weekend barbecues became routine. They took family vacations together, helped each other with home repairs, and celebrated birthdays side by side. Most evenings in summer ended with the four of them sipping drinks on someone else's patio while the kids chased fireflies. To the neighbors, the Morgans and the Hayeses were the definition of friendship and family. Lisa, on the other hand, seemed restless. The turning point came one evening when the power went out during a storm. After that night, things changed between them. They didn't talk about what had happened. Instead, they let it continue. The affair wasn't just physical. They told each other things they hadn't told their spouses in years. Back in their homes, nothing seemed out of place. Emily continued making lunchboxes and helping with homework. Jordan joked around with neighbors and coached Little League. But the secrecy began to take its toll. Tom started losing sleep. One afternoon, as Tom drove home from a brief meeting with Lisa, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the rearview mirror. He barely recognized himself. Meanwhile, Jordan remained unaware. He continued to trust his wife and his best friend. As summer turned to fall, the leaves began to change color, and so did everything else. But secrets, no matter how carefully buried, have a way of surfacing. The first time Tom and Lisa crossed the line, it was clumsy, confusing, and filled with guilt. Neither of them had planned it. It was a moment that unfolded slowly, then all at once. Afterward, they avoided each other for days, both trying to convince themselves that it had been a mistake, a lapse in judgment that wouldn't happen again. This time it was intentional. They began meeting at small motels just outside of town places where no one would recognize them. Lisa would leave under the pretense of visiting her sister, and Tom would say he was attending work functions. Their meetings were brief but intense, filled with the kind of passion neither of them had felt in years. Lisa imagined a house near the ocean, quiet and far from judgment. Emily was a good womankind, loyal, and trusting. She didn't deserve the betrayal. Lisa, too, had her fears. Jordan was unpredictable when angry. She had seen glimpses of his temper before, moments when his smile vanished and his voice became cold. She didn't know what he might do if he found out. Tom imagined waking up next to someone who truly understood him. His boss noticed his distraction and warned him about slipping standards. They were addicted. The charade continued. At neighborhood events, every lie, every meeting, every whisper in the dark had brought them one step closer to a reckoning. And when it came, it wouldn't just end in heartbreak. It would end in something far more permanent. Tom smiled beside Emily while stealing glances at Lisa across the room. Lisa laughed at Jordan's jokes and clapped at community meetings, all while texting Tom beneath the table. They believed they had control over everything. But in reality, they were spiraling, building a web of lies so fragile it could collapse with the slightest touch. Not to each other, perhaps, but to what the affair gave them. It made them feel alive, reckless, and important in a way their marriages no longer did. Even as the walls closed in, they kept returning to each other, convincing themselves that no one would ever find out. Lisa missed a parent-teacher meeting for her son and forgot a school fundraiser she had helped organize. She told herself it was just temporary, that they'd find a way to end it gracefully. But these were just dreams. Neither of them had taken a single real step toward that life. Jordan chalked it up to stress and tried harder to make her happy, unaware that the woman he loved was slipping away. He started working longer hours himself, hoping the extra money would help reignite something at home. The tension that lingered like smoke in the air. Someone close, someone with every reason to pay attention. She smiled and waved, pretending it was a coincidence that she was in that part of town. Another time, Tom's car was spotted near a diner he had no reason to visit. Rumors began to bubble quietly among those who paid close attention. Nothing concrete, just whispers of strange behavior, odd absences, and unexplained stories. The risk was too high, the consequences too severe. Tom felt constantly on edge, jumping at unexpected calls or messages. Lisa began to withdraw from her friends, fearing she might say something careless. Every moment they were apart became harder to bear. But every moment they were together carried the weight of guilt and fear. It wasn't just about physical intimacy. It was about being seen, heard, and wanted. But something had shifted. A door had opened that neither could fully close. Tom began pulling away from Emily, not with cruelty, but with silence. He no longer made time for their evening talks or weekend plans. He avoided eye contact when lying. Emily noticed the change, but didn't press him. She thought maybe he was just going through something he couldn't explain. Lisa dropped the kids at school and claimed to have boutique responsibilities. Tom started bringing small gifts, a bracelet, a scarf, things he said reminded him of her. Lisa kept them hidden at the back of a drawer, careful not to leave any trace. She saved every note, every scrap of affection, as if collecting pieces of a life that could never fully exist. Tom arranged his client meetings around their time together, telling Emily he was busy with end-of-quarter reports. They created fake calendar events and used cash for everything. Lisa even bought a prepaid phone to avoid leaving a digital trail. They thought they were being smart, cautious, untouchable. They tried to go back to normal Tom focusing on his family, Lisa on her routines, but the silence between them felt louder than any words. They began to miss the connection, the secret thrill, the sense of escape. Tom found himself looking forward to any excuse to see Lisa, even if it was just a glimpse while walking the dog or waving as he drove by. Lisa checked her phone constantly, waiting for a message that would bring both comfort and danger. It didn't take long for the affair to resume. The affair became a pattern. Mondays and Thursdays were usually safe. As the weeks passed, the lies became easier to tell. They grew more confident, more comfortable. They fantasized about a future together. Late at night, lying side by side in the dark, they whispered dreams of leaving their marriages and starting over. Tom worried about his children. He couldn't imagine not tucking them into bed or missing school recitals. The more they tried to suppress their emotions, the deeper they fell. Lisa grew more impatient with Jordan. She criticized his jokes, ignored his attempts to be affectionate, and started sleeping with her back turned. Eventually, the pressure of secrecy started to wear them down. Then came the close calls. One afternoon, Lisa ran into a neighbor while sneaking out of a motel. The affair wasn't just affecting them, it was poisoning everything around them. Tom stopped performing well at work. But the truth was, in public, what they didn't know was that someone had already begun to notice. Someone was watching the changes, the inconsistencies. The affair that once felt like a secret escape was now a ticking clock. The unraveling began slowly, like a quiet storm gathering strength beyond the horizon. Jordan Hayes had always trusted his wife. He wasn't the jealous type. She used to greet Jordan at the door with a smile and ask about his day, but now she barely looked up from her phone. He figured maybe she was overwhelmed, or maybe something had happened at work that she wasn't ready to talk about. He didn't want to be the kind of husband who interrogated his wife, but still, something gnawed at the back of his mind. She'd go out more often, usually with vague excuses about errands or meeting friends from the boutique. It was tucked into a side pocket of her purse, partially folded like she had meant to throw it away but forgot. Jordan almost missed it. He sat in his truck, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. But his mind was spinning with thoughts he couldn't shut off. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't focus. At night, he lay awake next to Lisa, wondering how she could smile at him while keeping such a secret. His stomach twisted into knots. The betrayal hit harder than he thought it would. His wife. His best friend. One evening, he installed a small GPS tracker under Lisa's car. The next day, he watched from his phone as she drove straight to the same motel. The signal stayed there for over 2 hours. While sitting alone in his garage, Jordan stared at a picture of the four of them on a fishing trip from the previous summer. They looked so happy, so normal. But now, Jordan waited. He waited for the right moment, the moment when everything would come to a head. He knew their pattern. He knew their favorite days and their favorite meeting spot. All he had to do was be there, waiting. All he could see were lies. His hands trembled as he tore the photo in half. He declined invitations, avoided the usual gatherings, made excuses to keep his distance. Lisa noticed the change but assumed it had to do with work. She asked once if everything was okay, and he smiled and said he was just tired. Tom tried reaching out too, sending a few casual texts, but Jordan didn't respond. He was preparing for something final. But Jordan had already stepped outside of the world they all shared. He was now operating in the quiet space between rage and revenge, where logic faded and impulse took over. Tom noticed, but assumed Jordan was busy with work. Lisa didn't press him either. He didn't want to understand why they did it. He wanted it to stop. Not just the affair, but the pain, the shame, the slow destruction of the life he had built. She was too distracted, too caught up in the thrill of her double life. When she came home, she told him she'd been helping a friend move furniture. All the nights they had shared stories, laughed, trusted each other, now reduced to a lie. When he opened it, his heart sank. It wasn't a receipt in her name, but it was charged to their joint card. The date was one of the afternoons she had claimed to be helping a friend with a baby shower. The address was a cheap motel off the interstate, an odd place for a boutique owner or a suburban mom to visit. Divorce seemed inevitable, but the thought of losing everything, the home, the kids, the reputation, filled him with dread. And then there was Tom, the man he had trusted with everything. Jordan didn't just feel betrayed. He felt humiliated, mocked, replaced, and said he hoped she didn't overdo it. She smiled, unaware of what he knew, but Jordan wasn't calm anymore. Inside, something had changed. The hurt had turned into something colder, something focused. He kept track of dates, times, and locations. He created a private folder on his computer, filling it with anything that could prove what was happening. But the more he uncovered, the less he knew what to do. She would come back late, sometimes with no explanation at all. He noticed the way Lisa checked her phone constantly, even at dinner. He noticed how she seemed to vanish emotionally whenever Tom was around, only to suddenly act more cheerful afterward. It was subtle, but to someone watching closely, it became obvious. When Jordan asked where she'd been, she'd give short answers, like she was irritated just by the question. He worked hard, came home tired, and tried to be a good husband. He believed Lisa loved him. He believed Tom was his best friend. There was no reason to doubt either of them until little things started to feel off. At first it was Lisa's mood. She became distant, distracted. Jordan brushed it off at first. Then came the hotel receipt. He didn't say anything right away. Instead, he started paying closer attention. Jordan's instincts kicked in. He started leaving work early on certain days, pretending to be on job sites but instead circling the neighborhood, watching from a distance. One Thursday afternoon, he saw Lisa leave the house wearing makeup she rarely wore anymore. She drove to a gas station and then sat in her car for a while. Jordan parked down the street, waiting. A few minutes later, Tom pulled up in his own car. He got into Lisa's vehicle, and they drove off together. Jordan didn't follow. He couldn't. For a week, Jordan said nothing. He went through the motions, acting as though nothing had changed. Finally, he decided to confront the truth head-on. He didn't ask questions. He nodded, kissed her on the forehead. He began to isolate himself from the couple. Meanwhile, Jordan began collecting evidence. He took screenshots of messages when Lisa's phone buzzed. Confronting them might bring temporary satisfaction, but it wouldn't fix the damage. One evening, in the days that followed, Jordan's behavior shifted again. He became quieter, almost eerily calm. He stopped documenting their affair. He had all the proof he needed. He no longer cared about explanations or apologies. And so, no one noticed the storm brewing beneath his stillness. Lisa continued with her lies, Tom with his secrets, both believing they were in control. The discovery had broken something deep inside him, something that wouldn't be fixed with words. And what happened next would change all their lives forever. It happened on a cool autumn evening, the kind where the wind rustles the leaves and everything feels a little quieter than usual. The sky was gray, clouds heavy with the promise of rain, but the streets of Westbridge remained calm. Most people were indoors, preparing for the coming storm, unaware that a far greater one was about to break in their peaceful suburb. Tom thought it was just another meeting with Lisa, He left work early, told Emily he had to finalize some numbers at the office. She didn't question it. He wore a light jacket and left his work bag in the car, planning to meet Lisa at a familiar place just outside of town, the woods near Pine Hollow. It wasn't a motel this time. Lisa had said she wanted something quieter, away from traffic and curious eyes. He didn't think it was strange. They had met there before, parked their cars at opposite ends of the trail and walked into the trees, careful not to leave signs. But Lisa never showed up. Tom waited, checking his phone, pacing near the clearing where they usually met. It struck the side of Tom's head before he could react. Tom lay motionless, blood soaking into the earth. Jordan dropped the rock and stepped back, hands shaking, heart pounding. It was clumsy and rushed. He knew it wouldn't stay hidden forever. But he didn't care, he just wanted to buy some time. He wiped his hands with a cloth he had brought, threw it into a nearby stream, and walked back to his car. He stared at what he had done, a mix of horror and numbness washing over him, but there was no regret, not yet. Only silence. He had no enemies, no history of mental health issues, no financial troubles. Police launched a search, combing the area around Pine Hollow, interviewing coworkers, friends, anyone who might know something. He fell hard, struggling to get up, but Jordan was already on top of him, the rock rising and falling in rapid, violent movements. She said no, but something about her answer lacked conviction. He said he hadn't seen Tom the day he disappeared. But when they presented him with the surveillance footage, and when they revealed they had found traces of blood in his garage, his composure cracked. Eventually, one of Lisa's coworkers came forward. She had overheard Lisa on a phone call, whispering and laughing in a way that suggested more than friendship. He simply closed his eyes, leaned back in the chair, and said he had done what he had to do. That he had watched everything he cared about crumble in front of him. That he had trusted Tom like a brother and been repaid with betrayal. When asked about it, Lisa denied everything. But her voice shook. Her story didn't line up. His funeral was held under gray skies, with dozens of mourners in black, struggling to comprehend what had happened. Emily barely spoke. Lisa didn't attend. There was no shouting, no dramatic threats, just the dull sound of impact and the rustle of leaves beneath Tom's body. Headlines screamed betrayal, murder, and secrets hidden in plain sight. Emily collapsed when she heard. Lisa went pale, locked herself in her room, and didn't come out for 2 days. The neighborhood was in shock. No one could understand how things had fallen apart so quickly, so violently. When he got home, Lisa was already there, folding laundry in the living room. Emily tried calling him when he didn't come home that night, but his phone went straight to voicemail. What remained was pain, disbelief, and the echo of something that had once felt like love but had ended in blood. She called his office, but no one had seen him since early afternoon. He visited Emily, comforted her, helped coordinate the neighborhood search group. He hugged her, told her everything would be okay, and stood beside her at the local prayer vigil. No one suspected him. Why would they? He was Tom's best friend. He was supposed to be grieving. His car was found 2 days later, abandoned near an old gas station 10 miles away. The keys were missing. The windows were rolled up. Nothing inside gave any clue. She asked if he wanted dinner. He nodded and said he wasn't very hungry. She didn't notice the small scratches on his hand or the dirt on his cuffs. She just kept folding. The forest swallowed the noise. After 20 minutes, he tried calling her, but there was no answer. Just as he turned to leave, a familiar voice called out from behind him, "Jordan." His calendar showed no meeting. His office had no record of client appointments. Surveillance footage from the gas station showed a car similar to Jordan S. parked nearby around the same time Tom vanished. Tom turned, surprised. But it also wasn't spontaneous. Jordan had been thinking about this moment for weeks. Every sleepless night, every moment he had imagined the betrayal in his head had led to this. Jordan stood about 10 feet away, hands in the pockets of his coat, expression unreadable. Just two men staring at each other in the quiet of the woods, both knowing exactly why they were there. Tom's heart skipped. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Jordan stepped closer, slow and deliberate. For a moment, everything was still. No words were exchanged. No explanations. What happened next was not premeditated in the way a carefully planned crime might be. The first blow came fast, a rock, heavy and jagged, lifted from the forest floor. When it was over, Jordan stood over the body, his chest heaving. He dragged Tom's body deeper into the woods, hidden behind thick underbrush and a fallen tree. He drove in silence, barely noticing the road ahead. Tom's disappearance was reported the next morning. The town reacted with confusion and concern. Tom wasn't the type to vanish. Jordan played his part well. But detectives noticed the inconsistencies. Tom's phone pinged near Pine Hollow, yet no reason could be found for him to be there. The investigation turned. Quiet questions began to circulate. One detective asked Emily if Tom had ever mentioned trouble at home. Detectives brought Jordan in for questioning. At first, he was calm, collected. He didn't break down. He didn't beg. He was arrested the same night. The news spread fast. Tom's body was found 3 days after Jordan's confession. The perfect lives they had all built were gone. The aftermath was not loud. It arrived in silence, like the settling dust after a violent storm. What once had been a quiet, well-ordered life in Westbridge now stood broken and scorched by betrayal, death, and consequences no one had seen coming. In the weeks following Jordan's confession and Tom's funeral, the town seemed to change. Conversations quieted. People glanced at each other with suspicion. Even the air felt different, thicker, slower, as if time itself had paused to absorb the tragedy. Not the man she had married, but the one who had risked everything for a secret. She wondered if he had felt any guilt, if he had planned to end the affair or confess. She hadn't loved Jordan for years, but she had never wished him harm. He had been good to her in his own way, and she had destroyed him. The guilt gnawed at her. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't forgive herself. He wondered if she cried, if she visited Tom's grave, if she ever thought about the man who had once held her hand at their wedding and swore to protect her. The house where the Morgans lived was sold to a couple from out of state. The Hayes' home sat empty for months, weeds overtaking the yard. The neighborhood children avoided walking near it. People tried to move on, but there was a hesitance in their steps, a subtle caution in their smiles. It was as if everyone had learned that even the quietest streets could hide the darkest secrets. He also thought about Emily and the children and the ripple effect of what he had done. She enrolled her kids in a new school, started therapy, and tried to build a routine from scratch. She kept a photo of Tom in the hallway, not for herself, but for the children. The affair had not only taken a life but destroyed 4 others in the process. What began as a secret escape had ended in blood and silence in courtrooms and empty chairs. It was a story people would whisper about for years, a warning hidden beneath gossip, a tragedy wrapped in betrayal. She didn't know how to explain everything to them, not yet. Maybe one day, when they were older. For now, they just needed stability. His actions had shattered more than just bones. They had shattered lives. She grew thinner, quieter, and rarely spoke to anyone. On some nights, she lit a candle and sat in the dark, staring at the flame until it burned out. The leaves still fell, the streets still echoed with laughter from children, but something had changed. Trust had been broken, lives had been lost, and the illusion that some lives are perfect had been shattered forever. She didn't know what she was waiting for, redemption, perhaps, or maybe just the courage to forgive herself, but neither came. She played every moment back in her mind, every stolen kiss, every excuse she had made. She told herself it was never meant to go this far. She never meant for anyone to get hurt. But that didn't change anything. But there were no answers now, only what-ifs and unfinished questions hanging in the air like dust motes in fading light. Even her own family distanced themselves, ashamed of the scandal. She thought about moving away, but there was nowhere she could go where the past wouldn't follow. Emily Morgan stood at the center of it all, a widow not just in name but in every possible sense. She had lost more than a husband. He rarely spoke, even to his lawyer. The initial shock of what he had done had faded, replaced by a dull, constant ache. He hadn't killed Tom in a burst of rage. Emily sat in the front row, hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes focused on the floor. Lisa sat several rows behind, unable to raise her eyes. When the judge sentenced Jordan to 25 years in prison, no one cried. There were no outbursts, just the sound of a gavel and the beginning of a new, painful chapter. It hadn't been a spontaneous accident. It had been a decision maybe not fully formed but made nonetheless, and now he had to live with it. The few times she ventured outside, she wore large sunglasses and kept her head down, avoiding the stares that followed her wherever she went. Neighbors whispered. Some pitied her, others blamed her outright. To them, she was the catalyst, the woman who set everything in motion. She had lost the image of the life she thought she had. The trust she placed in Tom, and the safety she had believed was unshakable. She had loved him. Through every routine moment and quiet evening, through every school play and weekend chore, she had believed in their life together. To know that it had all been shared with someone else, someone she had trusted, cut deeper than the loss itself. At first, she tried to stay strong for the children. She answered their questions gently, explaining that their father was gone but loved them very much. But as days turned into weeks, it became harder to hold the pieces together. Ethan stopped eating. Ava cried in her sleep. And Emily, despite her best efforts, began to drift. She found herself staring out windows for long stretches, hearing echoes of the past in every corner of the house. She tried to imagine the kind of man Tom had become in those final months. Lisa Hayes became the invisible woman of Westbridge. She stopped going to work. Her boutique closed within days of Jordan's arrest. But inside her home, Lisa was drowning in her own misery. The community's perception of her was unrelenting. Friends stopped calling. Strangers crossed the street when they saw her. Jordan, now inmate number 274,683 at a state penitentiary, sat alone in his cell most days. He thought about Lisa often, though he tried not to. The trial was short. Jordan pled guilty to second-degree murder. The courtroom was filled with silence rather than gasps. The facts were already known. There were no surprises left. Westbridge tried to return to normal, but the memory of what had happened lingered. Emily eventually moved in with her sister in a neighboring town. Lisa never left Westbridge. She stayed in the same house, more a ghost than a person. In the end, there were no victors. No one walked away stronger. And so, the town of Westbridge moved forward slowly, cautiously, always with one eye on the past.